Remember the trends of the 80s or the wacky inventions in the late 50s? Well, here are some old trends that make no sense, like radium. Yeah, radium. We're gonna start with radium. If you lived in the early 20th century and wanted a healthy glow, it was easy to find numerous products containing the newly discovered miracle of health, radium. You could get radium in everything from cosmetics to wool for babies. No one knew exactly how radium improved your life, and no one really cared. Good thing the poisonous element was so expensive that manufacturers just skimmed on adding it to their products. Experts found and concluded that radiation was a lifesaver after finding it reducing tumor growth and was present in the waters of some health spas. Soon, there were many radium products on the market that perpetrated to improve health and vitality, but the tragic stories, though, that comes with radium began to emerge in regards to its health impacts. As an example, at a factory in New Jersey, the women sued the US Radium Corp for poisoning and they won, which is great. Many of them ended up using the money, though, to pay for their own funerals, unfortunately, because at that point, it was pretty much too late, and in all, by 1927, more than 50 women had died as a direct result of radium paint poisoning. Next is Chinese porcelains and teas. I mean, I do like some tea sets, but they do also have uranium in them, but that's not what I'm gonna go into. Just mainly the fact that no one really uses them anymore. I mean, I do. So in the 1700s, China and England's East India Trading Company finally found a comfortable arrangement with which to trade with just each other. China got cotton and wool, and Britain got all the magical and mysteries of the East. Chinese porcelain was unlike any pottery the West has ever seen. So thin and bright and beautiful, as it took years for the Europeans to figure out how to replicate china cups and dinnerware, which is probably why it's called my good china. Sort of thing. To complete their sets, they also imported Chinese tea to those delicate cups, a fad that had never really ended in England. Ornamental hermits was also a thing apparently after King Henry VIII abolished Catholicism in England. The English people realized that they missed monks and religious hermits. By the 18th century, religious and political fires had finally burned out enough that the English could afford to be whimsical and romantic about spiritual things. Hermits, wise men who lived in complete solitude so that they could have pure minds and soul, came back into fashion, sort of. I don't know why, they're just a thing. Wealthy, eccentric men would employ wizened old men to live in a fake hermitage on their estate and make appearances to entertain their guests. I mean, if you wanted to entertain old men, you could just always blast his favorite records of Deep Purple and air guitar, Smoke on the Water. But I don't think these old men are the same type I'm thinking of when it comes to the guise of entertainment. Mummies were also another fad, especially the 19th century, around after the 19th centuries. After the first tombs of the pharaohs were discovered, Egypt became all the rage among the upper classes, and people began holding disintegration parties. Hosts would invite friends to spend a weekend watching a mummy get unwrapped and then disintegrate as they come into contact with the air, as much to the point that royalties would also eat mummies. Yeah, King Charles II had it arranged to have mummies in Egypt taken back to made into medicine and grind their bodies up and eat them. Yes, people did that. The European royals ate the royal mummies of Egypt. Mummy mania was such a dichotomy of fascination for many, many years, from the Middle Ages also to the 19th century. And considering the era, ancient Egyptians were considered one of the most advanced civilizations around the world. So, with that being said, the idea of seeing these eternal mummies, Europeans would prescribe ancient mummies as a medicine. Ground skeleton of their remains would be used to treat illnesses, headaches, or even the plague. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's what could have also started the plague, but I don't know. They didn't really put two and two together. And so with the king consuming the mummies, it was left the impression to the royals and the other social elite that it also seemed appropriate to eat, well, other royals. Staging train crashes was also a thing. There was also a surprising number of old steam locomotives left over an electric and diesel train came onto the scene. Promoters and entertainers of the early 20th century came up with the great use for them, labeling the trains such as the Great Depression versus the National Recovery Administration, and crashing them into one another. Engineers would lock the throttles in place and jump out of the engine, which would progress on a specifically built track when they collided at between 45 and 90 miles per hour. I don't know, maybe they just thought it was a good ad. Tapeworm diets was also another trend that had to die, like right away. Dieters would swallow beef tapeworm cysts, usually in the form of a pill, and the theory was that the tapeworms would reach maturity in the intestines and absorb food. This could also cause weight loss along with diarrhea and vomiting, and the diet was thought to have started in the early 1900s, in which the advertisements for sanitized, quote-unquote sanitized tapeworms were given. Once they established themselves, they survived by living the nutrients consumed by their host. While once again in theory this could result in weight loss, there's also a chance for the considerable harm. After all, these are animals, these are tapeworms. They can hold in various parts of the body and grow in large parts and sizes, resulting in blockage in organs and potentially even death. If you've seen that show Monster Inside Me, you know why. The idea is simple and gross. You take a pill containing a tapeworm, once hatched, hatch, the parasite grows inside of the host, ingesting part of whatever the host eats. In theory, this enables the dieter to simultaneously lose weight and eat without worrying about calorie intake or their life. Tear catchers was also a fashionable way to cry in the Victorian era. After your tapeworm diet didn't work out, you could always cry it out. You could cry your tears into a tiny little bottle until it was full, as a special stopper allowed for slow evaporation of the tears, and when it was empty, your mourning was over. See, the tear bottle tradition had endured more than 3,000 years, and tear bottles, or lacrimatory, I don't know, were common in the ancient Middle Eastern societies, and even today they are still produced in that region. Tear bottles were prevalent in the ancient Roman times, and when mourners filled a small tile vial or cups with tears and placed them in burial tombs as symbols of love and respect, sometimes women were even paid to cry into cups as they would walk around in the mourning procession. Those crying the loudest would also get the most money, and so legend goes. The more anguish and tears produced, the more important value the deceased person was. In the Old Testament of the Bible, a reference collecting tears in a bottle appears in Psalms 56:8. When David prays to God, "Thou tellest my wanderings, thou put my tears in thy bottle. Are they not in thy book?" David is referring to the belief that God keeps a record of human pain and suffering as always remembering our sorrows. Tear bottles reappeared during the Victorian period in the 19th century, as we know, and the source of showing a loss of loved ones in a little tiny bottle, and decorated in silver and pewter. Specialized stoppers, again, was to stop the tears from evaporating, and if you stopped crying and the tears were full, then you should stop crying. Pet rocks were also a thing, if I'm honest. I think they're the best inanimate objects a person could call as a pet. You know, in Sesame Street, where Elmo has a personal beef against Rocco, Zoe's pet rock? Well, I can't understand him because rocks are great. Pet rocks is a collectible toy made in 1975, advertising by Gary Doll. These rocks were packaged in custom cardboard boxes with, complete ventilation holes and straw bending, imitating a pet carrier. The fad lasted about 6 months after ending a short increase of sales, obviously because it's a rock. Although the February 1976 they were discounted due to lower sales, Doll sold over 1 million, and for $4 each, becoming a millionaire. He continued working in advertising, however, he avoided interviews for years because he said this was the best to avoid a bunch of wackos harassing him for lawsuits and threats. But then again, when you want a pet rock, it came in a box, so it has to be legit. I mean, having big hair also seems pretty cool, especially if it's natural, but if it wasn't, people would still keep trying to find a way to up the volume. I mean, it's been shown prevalent in the Victorian era and even prior with the giant white wigs. For both genders, big hair became also popular again in 1980s, as well as in the 60s. The term also used in glam, hair metal, goth, and alternative cultures is particularly associated with what fashion is in the 1970s, 80s, and as I said, early 90s and 60s. Actresses like Raquel Welch, Bridget Bardot, Priscilla Presley, and Jane Fonda became those big hair icons in the 60s and 70s. Women hairstyles labeled as big hair became fashionable during the period, and with the Farrah Fawcett look and swimsuit poster of the iconic example, these origins of big hair became even a prevalent feature in Japanese street and alternative fashion, including Harajuku and Ganguro. In the early 1980s, Brooke Shields became a dominant force in the fashion trends after becoming a teen model in 1980. She was appearing in numerous magazine covers with different hairstyles of long and big hair, making her actually one of the biggest influential fashion icons in the 1980s. Depending on the specific style, hairstyles in big hair categories may require a number of styling, cutting, or treatment techniques. As well, when it comes to styling of punk and alternative big hairstyles, also requiring backcombing, which is teasing, and delivering applications of style aids as hairspray, hair mousse, or, hair gel. Kind of like the whole mohawk thing. Often in combination with the use of hair dryers as well. But just also a little fun fact, when it comes to mohawks, punks usually did that just to imitate the police because they knew that they were cruel to indigenous. Magic eye is also what you think of when you think about the functioning 90s. You might think of the tricky 3D image. These pictures, also known in the vision literature as audio stereograms, hidden 3D image discernible only when a viewer arranges their eyeballs in a specific way. Cherry Smith and Tom Bacci created a magic eye brand that contributed in the popular success in the 90s, but stereograms weren't that new. Their lineage goes back in the 19th century, discovering of stereopsis, depth information we get from having two eyes spaced slightly apart. This is a feature of visual perception that is manipulated by devices like the Viewmaster, the red novelty toy that comes with a reel of tiny dual photos. The visual trickery of these audio stereograms images captivate the nation, even if they didn't always understand what was going on. All they knew was that if you stared at a magic eye image for long enough, your eyes just, stay completely unfocused, a 3D image would appear. It was amazing when it did work out, but if it didn't work for everybody, it caused a lot of frustration and anxiety. I mean, with this magic eye, do you see anything? Do you see this? Do you see a sailboat? If you've seen that movie Mallrats, you know what I'm talking about. And speaking of history, that's all for today. Be sure to like and subscribe. My name is Jess, and I wish you all the best. Bye.